Chapter 1. Promised. Since childhood, Celeste Morland had been told who she belonged to before she even understood the meaning of love. At 12, while other girls whispered about ribbons and garden games, she was seated at a long oak table, hands folded, as her father's voice declared her future. "You will be the Duchess of Ashbourne. It is arranged. It is settled." Those words had pressed into her bones like scripture. From that day on, every smile she wore, every lesson she endured, every hour of embroidery by candlelight was a rehearsal for a life she was meant to play, not necessarily to live. At first, she believed it a fairy tale. After all, Tristan Ashbourne, already whispered about as the future Duke, had looked at her once in the rose garden. She had been clutching a book too large for her lap, lips stained with berry juice, when he asked her what she read. She remembered the kindness in his voice, the way he knelt so he would not tower over her. In that moment she believed perhaps being given was not such a curse, but years had passed, and innocence faded. The Duke was not merely a man. He was a title, a power, a responsibility. To marry him was to bear the weight of a household, a lineage, an entire kingdom's gossip. Celeste often wondered if he remembered her as she remembered him, or had she been nothing more than a promise scribbled in ink between families? Still, she obeyed. She learned the art of walking silently in satin slippers. She memorized the proper angle of her head when offering a curtsy. She practiced the gentle tilt of her smile, the kind that must appear effortless even when it weighed on her jaw. And yet, beneath all this practiced perfection, there lived a small, wild hope that maybe, just maybe, he would choose her not because he had to, but because he wanted to. On the morning of her wedding rehearsal, Celeste sat before her vanity, lace gown spread like spilled cream across the floor. Her mother hovered behind her, fastening pearls into her hair. "Sit straighter," her mother murmured. "A duchess must never appear timid." Celeste obeyed, but inside her heart whispered, "What if he does not see me at all?" Her elder sister Vivian leaned against the doorway, lips curved in a smile that never quite touched her eyes. "Do not fret, dear Celeste. Dukes are not men who choose, they simply accept what is placed before them." The words struck sharper than they should have. Celeste looked at her reflection, at the pale girl who seemed made of duty, and wondered if her sister was right. Chapter 2. The Chapel and the Duke. The chapel was dressed for forever. White roses curled around polished pillars, golden chandeliers spilled light across pews packed with noblemen and ladies, their jewels glittering like small suns. Incense lingered in the air, clinging to velvet and lace. Celeste stood at the edge of the aisle, veil lowered, gown sweeping behind her like a tide. Every step felt both rehearsed and terrifying. Her palms were damp, her breath shallow. The eyes of the world seemed to press against her skin, waiting to see if she would falter. She had not seen him yet. The Duke. But she felt him. When Tristan Ashbourne entered, the crowd hushed, as if the air itself bowed before him. His presence filled the chapel, tall and commanding, with the weight of generations carried in his stride. His black coat gleamed, silver embroidery catching the candlelight. Yet there was something in his eyes, a distance, a weariness, that Celeste caught even from across the room. Her heart clenched. She wanted him to look at her and remember the rose garden, the girl with berry-stained lips who spoke of books. She wanted him to see her, not the title she represented. The minister raised his hands. The organ groaned to life. This was it, the moment promised for years. But then, footsteps, sharp, hurried, echoing against stone. A servant, breathless, pushed through the doors. His boots rang like a warning bell. He stumbled toward the Duke, bowed low and extended a sealed envelope. The wax bore Celeste's crest. Her pulse stuttered. "I never sent a letter." The Duke took it, brows furrowing. He cracked the seal, unfolded the page. Silence swept the chapel like a blade. Every rustle, every whisper, every cough ceased. Celeste watched his face pale as his eyes darted across the words. His jaw tightened, his hand trembling just enough for her to notice. Something inside her twisted. Chapter 3. The letter that wasn't hers. Your Grace? Her voice quavered, fragile in the silence. He looked at her as though she were a stranger. Celeste? These are your words? She shook her head before he even finished, throat closing. What words? He lifted the paper, voice breaking as he read aloud. I cannot go through with this. Please, release me. Marry my sister instead. Gasps rippled through the pews. Her knees weakened. She staggered forward. No, I never... But before she could finish, another voice lilted across the room. Vivian. She pressed a handkerchief to her lips, eyes glistening with false tears. Dearest Celeste, if you cannot bear it, then let me. I will save you. I will save us all. Celeste's vision blurred. The betrayal in her sister's eyes was sharper than any dagger. The Duke closed the letter with finality. His jaw was clenched, but he did not argue. Then, it is settled. Settled. As if her life were nothing but a contract to be amended. Laughter whispered among the guests. Some pitied her. Most did not. Her chest burned. She wanted to scream, to tear the letter in half, to drag Tristan's gaze back to her and force him to see truth. But no sound came. No one stopped her. So she turned. She walked out of the chapel, her veil trailing like a ghost, her footsteps echoing louder than the organ that never finished its song. Outside, the sky cracked open, grey clouds spilling rain. It soaked through silk and lace clinging to her skin. She lifted her face to the storm, lips trembling. I never wrote that letter, she whispered. Only the rain believed her. And just like that, she was erased. One forged letter had stolen everything. And Celeste vowed that day, if the world would not see her, she would vanish from it. If your entire future was stolen by one letter, would you fight to take it back or disappear like Celeste did? Tell us in the comments, we want to know. Chapter 4. Miss Eleanor Hale. The governess was not meant to be remembered. That was the first rule Celeste Morland lived by. She no longer answered to her true name. Instead, she was Miss Eleanor Hale, a figure of quiet shadows, meant to slip unnoticed through grand halls and nursery corridors. By day she tended to books and ink-stained fingers, guiding a young boy through sums and history. By night, she stitched her own gowns by candlelight, plain grey dresses that would never invite a second glance. It had been 4 years since the chapel, since the storm. 4 years since she burned every letter that bore her name and vanished from her family's world. If Vivian had stolen her crown, Celeste would wear silence as her armour. Yet silence did not erase memory. Every time her charge, 7-year-old Henry Ashbourne, the Duke's nephew, looked up at her with storm-coloured eyes, she saw echoes of Tristan. The same furrowed brow, the same restless intelligence. The boy was an orphan now, his parents taken in a carriage accident. And though Celeste told herself her duty was only to educate, her heart betrayed her. She mothered him. She soothed his nightmares. She laughed when he painted ink across her cheeks in mischief. He was not her child, yet she loved him as fiercely as if he were. But in quiet moments, when Henry slept, she would stand at the window of the country estate and whisper to the night, "You stole my future, but not my heart." Chapter 5. Whispers in the hall's life as a governess was meant to be invisible, but whispers always found their way through stone walls. Celeste often caught the servants' murmurs. She's too refined to be common. Did you hear her French? No mere governess learns it so well. Do you think she's... someone? Every rumour was a blade pressed to her throat. If anyone guessed her true name, if word reached Vivian, ruin would follow. So she kept her head bowed. She smiled softly. She never corrected the stories spun around her. Still, the past haunted her in unexpected ways. At meals, she avoided the great dining hall, choosing instead to eat in the nursery with Henry. The sight of long banquet tables still made her chest tighten, reminders of her sister's triumph, of stolen vows. At church, she sat in the back pew, veil lowered. Once, the minister asked if she would read aloud a psalm, and the words had stuck in her throat. The memory of another church, another vow that never came, silenced her tongue. And at night, she dreamed. Dreamed of the Duke's eyes the moment he read that cursed letter. Dreamed of the rain soaking her wedding gown. Dreamed of her own voice screaming, unheard. When she woke, she pressed a hand to her chest and whispered, "I was never unwanted. He just never knew the truth." Yet deep down another voice argued, "But he believed the lie, didn't he? He let you go without a fight." Chapter 6. The Duke's Return. It was an ordinary morning when the rumour reached her ears. The Duke of Ashbourne was returning to his estate. Celeste's hand froze on the teacup she poured for Henry. Heat bled into her palm, but she did not flinch. Instead, she carefully set the cup down as if nothing had changed. Inside, her heartbeat thundered. 4 years had passed since she had last seen him. 4 years since she had heard his voice, low and steady, saying the words that cut her soul. "I cannot marry you." Now he would walk the very halls where she lived. He would dine at the same table, pass the same corridors. She told herself she could remain hidden, that he would never glance at a governess. But her body betrayed her. Her breath grew shallow, her fingers trembled, her throat ached as if it already remembered his name. Henry looked up from his porridge. "Miss Hale, why do you look so pale?" Celeste forced a smile. "Just a draught, darling, eat your breakfast." But as she watched him, she knew her world was no longer safe. The Duke's return meant her past had found her, and no matter how hard she tried, no governess could remain invisible forever. Chapter 7. The Duke returns. Ashbourne Hall had been silent for years. The grand estate, with its towering windows and ivy-clad walls, had slumbered since the Duchess, Vivian, left it behind for another husband, another fortune. Servants whispered that the house itself mourned, its echoes hollow, its chandeliers dim. But that morning, life surged through its halls again. Carriages thundered across the gravel drive, horses stamped, their breath rising like smoke in the cold dawn. The staff rushed to their stations, maids tugging sheets from guest rooms, footmen polishing silver, the cook barking orders as though a war had begun. Celeste stood at the nursery window, Henry clutching her hand as he pressed his nose to the glass. "There he is!" Henry cried. His little voice quivered with awe. "My uncle, the Duke." Celeste followed his gaze. Tristan Ashbourne descended from the carriage in a sweep of black coat and polished boots. The morning sun caught the silver threads at his shoulders, the glint of a signet ring heavy on his hand. His presence consumed the drive, every servant bowing low as though gravity itself had shifted around him. Celeste's breath caught. 4 years had passed, yet he looked both the same and impossibly changed. His shoulders broader, his face carved sharper, lines etched around eyes that once seemed unbreakable. The weight of regret hung on him like armour. Her pulse thundered. She pressed Henry's shoulder. "Come away from the window." But she could not move herself. She could only watch, silent, as the man she once called her future crossed the threshold of the hall she now called her prison. Chapter 8. The Governess meets the Duke. That evening the household gathered in the drawing room to greet him. Celeste had prayed to remain hidden, to let the shadows keep her safe, but Henry tugged her hand, insistent. "Miss Hale must come. She is the only one who makes me brave." So she went. The chamber glittered with candlelight, fire roaring in the hearth. Nobles filled the air with polite laughter, the scrape of boots, the clink of crystal. At the centre stood the Duke, tall and unmoving, like a storm contained within flesh. Henry rushed forward. "Uncle!" The Duke's stern expression softened. He knelt, gathering the boy into his arms. For a fleeting second, warmth broke through the cold mask, and Celeste's throat ached at the sight. She remembered him like this, kindness hidden beneath duty. Then Henry tugged her forward. "This is Miss Hale. She takes care of me." Celeste bowed her head, heart pounding. "Your Grace." For a moment, silence stretched. She dared not look at him, not truly, but when she lifted her eyes, just once, she saw his gaze fixed upon her, sharp, searching. His lips parted as though to speak, then closed again. A strange tension rippled through him, as if he had seen something long lost. He extended a hand, polite but unyielding. "Miss Hale." His voice was rougher than she remembered, deeper, a current of restrained fire beneath the surface. Her gloved hand met his. The contact was brief, proper, yet a jolt shot through her, a memory of warmth of another day when his hand had nearly held hers at an altar. She pulled back quickly. He studied her a moment longer, then turned away, addressing the steward, but his eyes lingered when he thought she wasn't looking. Celeste steadied her breath. He cannot know. He must not. Chapter 9. Whispers of Recognition. In the days that followed, the Duke moved through the house like a shadow that consumed all others. His footsteps echoed down corridors Celeste tried to avoid, yet fate seemed determined to place them together. Once, in the library, she reached for a volume of history only to find his hand already upon it. Their fingers brushed, and she snatched hers back, muttering an apology. He tilted his head, studying her. "You've read this?" "Yes, Your Grace." "Most governesses prefer lighter tales." She forced a smile. "Children deserve more than fairy stories." Something flickered in his gaze, recognition, or perhaps memory. For once his mouth curved, not in humour, but in something softer, almost wistful. "I knew someone once who said the same." Her stomach clenched. Another time, she walked Henry through the gardens, the boy darting ahead among the roses. The Duke followed at a distance, hands clasped behind his back. She bent to tie Henry's bootlace, and Tristan's voice drifted above her. "You speak to him with more patience than most mothers." Her throat tightened. She kept her eyes on the boy's shoe. "He deserves kindness." When she rose, his gaze lingered again. There was something in it she feared, too sharp, too curious. And then, one evening, in the dim library while Henry slept, she sang softly to herself, an old melody from her girlhood. The walls carried the sound farther than she intended. She turned and found him in the doorway. He did not move. His voice was low, strained. "That song. Who taught it to you?" Celeste froze. He remembers. For a heartbeat, the past pressed against the present, the girl who once dreamed of being his duchess, and the man who once could have been her forever. She lowered her gaze, voice trembling. A memory. Nothing more. But as she passed him, his eyes followed, heavy with questions he had not yet dared to ask. Chapter 10. Sparks of Defiance. The nursery had always been Celeste's refuge. Its walls were smaller, its air softer, and within it she could almost believe she was just a governess. Ordinary, safe, unseen. But that safety shattered when the Duke stepped inside one rain-slick morning. Henry sat slouched at his desk, quill dangling uselessly from his fingers. Celeste bent over his shoulder, coaxing him through arithmetic. "You see," she said gently, "if you have 4 apples and give away 2. "I'd still have 3, Henry interrupted with a grin, "because I'd keep 1 hidden in my pocket." Celeste laughed, shaking her head. "That is not how sums work." "It is if you are clever enough," came another voice. The sound froze her, deep, commanding, with an edge of amusement. She turned. Tristan Ashbourne leaned in the doorway, arms crossed, dark hair damp from the rain. His presence filled the small room, making even the hearth's flames flicker. Celeste straightened, heart racing. "Your Grace." Henry beamed. "Uncle," Did you know Miss Hale thinks numbers are more important than swords? The Duke's eyes glinted. Does she? Then perhaps Miss Hale has never been in a duel. Celeste folded her hands, forcing calm. Numbers feed men and keep estates running, Your Grace. Without sums there would be no swords to polish. For a moment, silence hung between them. Then something shifted in his gaze, a flicker of surprise, of challenge. You speak boldly for a governess, he said. Her pulse quickened. Perhaps I forget myself. Perhaps, he murmured, but his eyes lingered as if forgetting herself made her more intriguing. Henry giggled, oblivious to the storm rising between them. Uncle, will you stay for lessons? The Duke smiled faintly at the boy, but his voice when he answered was lower, rougher. Yes, I think I will. And from that moment every lesson became a duel, numbers against steel, wit against power, her defiance against his command. Chapter 11. Shadows and Secrets. The days blurred into a dangerous rhythm. Celeste told herself she could avoid him, that if she kept her eyes lowered and her words clipped, he would forget her face. But the Duke seemed drawn to her silence, pressing against it as though determined to break it. At dinner, he asked questions meant for her ears. Does the boy eat well, Miss Hale? Has he taken to his studies? She answered quickly, politely, never raising her gaze. Yet when she did, she caught him watching, not with suspicion, but with the slow curiosity of a man seeing something he could not name. In the library, their hands brushed again over a volume of poetry. He did not pull back this time. Instead, he held her gaze for a breath too long, eyes dark with something unsaid. At night she dreamed of him, dreams that left her breathless, guilty, trembling at dawn. She pressed her palms to her face and whispered, You are not Celeste anymore. You cannot be. But truth had a way of seeping through cracks. One evening Henry pouted over his lessons and slammed his quill onto the desk. I hate sums. I wish my uncle would teach me. He is a duke. He must know everything. Celeste smiled despite herself. Even dukes must learn. A low voice answered from the doorway. Indeed we must. She turned, startled to see Tristan standing there, amusement in his eyes. Perhaps Miss Hale should teach me as well, he said softly. Her breath caught. She could not tell if it was jest or confession. She lowered her gaze. You already know more than I could teach. But as he stepped closer, his presence filling the room, she feared he knew the truth, that she had once been promised to him, that every lesson she gave now was another thread pulling them back together. Chapter 12. The Dance He Shouldn't Have Offered. The house came alive with music one evening, the drawing rooms cleared for a small gathering of nobles. Celeste should not have been there. Governesses belonged upstairs with children, not among silk gowns and crystal chandeliers. But Henry begged her to come, tugging her hand as he spun about in his too large waistcoat. Dance with me, Miss Hale. Please. So she stood in a corner, plain grey dress blending with shadows, while the glittering world swirled before her. Then the Duke approached. He cut through the crowd like a storm through calm waters. Every head bowed as he passed, yet his eyes were fixed on her alone. Miss Hale, he said, voice low, extending a hand. Will you dance? Her heart slammed against her ribs. She shook her head quickly. Your Grace, it would not be proper. Proper, he echoed, lips curving faintly. And yet, I am asking. For a moment, time stilled. Music faded, laughter dimmed. All she could hear was her own breath, the memory of another day when he had not asked, but commanded her future with silence. I cannot, she whispered. He held her gaze, eyes burning with questions he did not voice. Then slowly he withdrew his hand. As you wish. He turned back into the crowd, but she felt the weight of his absence as though something had been torn from her. Later that night, alone in her chamber, she pressed her hands to her face and wept, not because he had asked, but because she had wanted to say yes. Chapter 13. Vivienne's arrival. It was the sound of wheels on gravel that warned her. Celeste stood at the nursery window, heart stopping as a gilded carriage rolled up the drive. The crest on its door was unmistakable. Vivienne. The elder sister who had stolen her letter, her life, her name. The hall filled with whispers as the Duchess swept inside, cloaked in silks, her hair a crown of jewels. She carried herself with the confidence of a woman who had never once been denied. Celeste fled to the nursery, pulse racing, but fate was cruel. Vivienne's laughter soon echoed down the corridor, closer, closer, until the door opened. "Henry, darling," Vivienne sang, sweeping the boy into her arms. Then her eyes flicked to Celeste. For a moment silence stretched. "Who is this?" Vivienne asked sweetly, though her gaze was sharp as glass. "The governess," Henry chirped. "Miss Hale." Vivienne's smile lingered, but her eyes narrowed. She tilted her head, studying Celeste as one studies a ghost. "How curious," Vivienne murmured. "There's something familiar about her." Celeste bowed her head quickly, hiding trembling hands in her skirts. Vivienne's smile deepened, and in that instant Celeste knew. Her sister had seen enough to wonder. Chapter 14. Whispers in the Rain. The storm came sudden, rolling in from the moors like a beast loosed from its cage. Celeste lit candles in the nursery as thunder rattled the windows. Rain streaked across glass panes, blurring the gardens into dark watercolours. Henry slept fitfully under his blankets, mumbling through dreams. She smoothed his hair, whispering softly, though her own heart was unsteady, because she could feel him in the house. Tristan. Since Vivienne's arrival, he had grown quieter, more withdrawn, shadows deepening in his eyes. And yet, more than once, she had caught him staring, not at Vivienne, never at Vivienne, but at her, at the governess who should have been nothing. Celeste rose, restless. She drifted into the corridor, lantern in hand. Servants hurried past, closing shutters, whispering of flooded roads. The storm roared as if determined to shake secrets loose. She found herself at the door of the library. It stood open, lamplight flickering within. And there he was. The Duke stood at the tall windows, lightning carving lines across his face. He turned at her step, gaze dark, as though he had been waiting. "Miss Hale." His voice was rough. "You walk the halls late." She lowered her lantern, trying to steady her voice. "The child was restless. I could not sleep." His eyes held hers too long. "Nor can I." Silence pressed around them, heavy with unsaid things. The storm lashed the windows, thunder shaking the glass. Celeste's breath hitched. She knew she should leave, but instead, her feet carried her farther inside. Chapter 15. The song she shouldn't have sung. The library smelled of old leather and rain. Books towered in dark shelves, the fire crackling low. Celeste moved toward it, setting her lantern on the table. To calm her nerves, she hummed. Softly at first, then fuller, the melody spilling into the air. It was an old lullaby, one her nursemaid once sang in the nursery at Moorland Manor, a song Celeste herself had often carried on her lips as a child. The moment the sound touched the air, Tristan stilled. "Where did you learn that?" His voice cut through the storm. She froze, heart hammering. The notes died on her tongue. "It is just an old song." "No," he said, stepping closer. "Not just any song. My betrothed sang that once years ago in a rose garden." She laughed when I asked the words. "Do you know what she said?" Celeste's throat tightened. "I cannot imagine." She said, "Songs are just poems too shy to be read aloud." Her breath faltered. Tristan's eyes locked on her face, searching, relentless. "How do you know it?" She shook her head quickly, stepping back. "Please, Your Grace, I—" He closed the space between them. "Who are you?" Her lips parted, but no sound came. For a moment, lightning split the windows, and she thought he might see the truth written in her eyes. But she turned away, voice breaking. I am no one. Chapter 16. The letter revealed sleep would not come. Tristan prowled the halls long after Celeste fled the library, her song still echoing in his ears. He could not banish the image of her trembling hands, her pale face, the way her voice cracked as if holding back an ocean. At last, unable to bear it, he entered the west wing, the part of the house few dared to tread. Dust gathered in abandoned rooms, relics of a past he tried to bury. The storm rattled the shutters, lightning flashing across forgotten shelves. He moved to an old desk, drawers stiff with neglect. Perhaps he sought distraction. Perhaps fate guided his hand. When the drawer opened, he froze. Inside lay a book of poetry, her favourite, he remembered. He opened it, fingers tracing worn pages, and there, tucked between sonnets, was an envelope yellowed with time. The wax had been broken years ago, but the words inside, he recognised them at once. I cannot go through with this. Please, release me. Marry my sister instead. His chest clenched. He read the lines again, slower, his eyes catching on the tilt of letters, the strokes of ink. Wrong. These were not her letters, not Celeste's careful hand. He remembered her penmanship, neat, deliberate, each letter curved like lace. But this script was heavier, angled, bearing Vivian's flourish. His breath left him in a rush. My God, he whispered. It was forged. The storm howled outside as if echoing his rage. He slammed the book shut, fists trembling. Memories reeled. The chapel, her pale face, the rain soaking her gown as she walked away. He had believed her silence, her absence. He had believed the lie. And in doing so, he had destroyed them both. Chapter 17. Reckoning in the Dark. He found her in the corridor, lantern light casting shadows on her face. She startled when he stepped into her path, eyes wide. Miss Hale, he said, though his voice broke on the name. Or should I say, Celeste? Her breath hitched. He held up the letter, crumpled now in his hand. I found it. The letter that ended us. Tell me the truth. Did you write this? Her lips parted, trembling. For a heartbeat, she looked as though she might deny it again. But the weight of his eyes, burning, desperate, furious, stripped her of pretense. No, she whispered. Tears welled in her eyes. I never did. His chest ached, both with relief and anguish. Then why did you not speak? Why did you let me believe? Because you never asked! The words tore from her, raw and broken. You read lies and chose to believe them. You turned from me before I could even breathe. The storm roared between them, thunder crashing like judgment. Tristan staggered closer, voice hoarse. Do you know what it has cost me? Years of regret, a marriage without love, nights haunted by the sound of your name. And all this time, you were here, alive, and I... She pressed a hand to her lips, sobbing. I could not come back. She won. Vivian always wins, and if she knew, if she saw me here... I will not let her win again, he vowed, his voice sharp as steel. He caught her hand, gripping it as if to anchor himself. Celeste, look at me. Her eyes lifted, shining with tears. You were mine. You are mine still, and I will burn this house to the ground before I lose you again. For the first time in years, she let herself believe him. The storm outside raged, but between them something steadier ignited, a fire not of ruin, but of return. And though the world still conspired to tear them apart, for that moment they stood together in the truth at last. Chapter 18. A Letter. Intercepted. Celeste wrote by candlelight, the storm in her chest heavier than the silence of the nursery. Henry slept soundly under his blankets, his dark lashes trembling against pale cheeks, the faintest smile lingering as though dreams kept him safe. She stood over him for a long moment, fingers brushing his curls, memorizing the weight of him in her life. He had been her solace, her anchor, her reason to endure. But now she would leave him too. The quill trembled in her hand as she bent over parchment. The words blurred through tears. "Your Grace, forgive me. I cannot remain. My presence here will ruin you once more. Do not look for me." It was not fair, not complete, just a small, sharp blade of truth. But it was all she could give. She folded the letter carefully, sealing it with wax, placing it upon the writing desk where the steward would find it come morning. Her heart ached as she began to pack. Her few gowns were plain, threadbare at the hems. She folded them neatly into her small trunk, hands lingering over a worn ribbon Henry had once tied to her wrist during play. She pressed it to her lips, then tucked it inside. When dawn came, she told herself, she would vanish again. Better a ghost than a ruin. But she was not the only one awake. Vivienne drifted through the corridors like perfume, her silks whispering over stone. A maid had mentioned a letter upon the governess's desk, sealed, curious. Vivienne's instincts sharpened at once. Letters had been her weapon once before, and if fortune smiled, they would be her weapon again. She slipped into the room without hesitation. The candle still smouldered. On the desk lay Celeste's farewell, her handwriting painfully familiar. Vivienne's lips curved as she broke the seal, eyes dancing over the words. "Oh, sister," she whispered, voice dripping with poison. "Still so weak, still so foolish." The letter crackled between her fingers as thunder growled outside. She folded it delicately, tucking it into her jewelled bodice. Already a plan bloomed like fire in her mind. Tomorrow at the Duke's dinner she would wield it, and this time she would make certain Celeste was not merely erased, but destroyed. Chapter 19. The Dinner Exposure. Ashbourne Hall blazed with candlelight that evening. Chandeliers glittered, their crystal drops catching firelight like scattered stars. Nobles in silk and velvet filled the long dining chamber, their voices a river of polite laughter and concealed daggers. Celeste stood near the end of the table, grey gown modest, hands clasped so tightly, her knuckles ached. She had not meant to attend. A governess had no place among dukes and ladies. But Henry had clung to her skirts, refusing to eat unless Miss Hale sat nearby. She had yielded, for him, not for herself. The Duke presided at the head of the table, his profile carved in shadow by the roaring fire. He spoke little, but when his eyes lifted, they caught hers more than once. Each glance was a brand against her skin. She looked away quickly, pulse hammering. And then, Vivienne rose. Her jewels gleamed, her smile sweet as honey. She lifted her wineglass, but instead of toasting, she drew a folded paper from her bodice. "My lords and ladies," she began, her voice a melody of cruelty, "I stumbled upon something most curious while exploring these halls." She held up the letter. A note written by our very own governess. Celeste's stomach turned to stone. Vivienne unfolded the page, her voice ringing clear. "I cannot remain. My presence here will ruin you once more. Do not look for me." Gasps rippled around the table. One woman dropped her fork with a clatter. A man muttered, "Scandalous." Vivienne pressed the paper to her lips, feigning pity. Tell me, should a governess write such things to a duke? Unless, of course, she believes herself more than she is. Eyes turned, every one of them, toward Celeste. Heat surged up her neck, her breath shallow. She tried to speak, to deny, but the words caught like thorns in her throat. Her gaze flew to Tristan. The Duke stood slowly, his chair scraping. The room hushed. Celeste's heart pounded. Say it. Tell them. Tell them who I am. Tell them the truth. But his lips did not move. He only looked at her, eyes storm-tossed, jaw clenched, as if bound by chains she could not see. His silence was deafening. The nobles began to murmur, whispers spreading like wildfire. Improper. Shameful. Dangerous. Celeste's vision blurred. Tears stung her lashes. Her chest ached with betrayal deeper than any wound Vivian could inflict. Because once again, the Duke had not spoken for her. Chapter 20. Flight into the corridors. The world tilted. The laughter, the whispers, the glittering chandeliers, all collapsed into a blur as Celeste turned and fled. Her slippers struck marble like frantic bells, skirts catching on her ankles as she stumbled through corridors lined with portraits of Ashbourne ancestors. Their painted eyes seemed to sneer at her, to echo the mockery that rang in her ears. She burst into the darkened stairwell, heart racing, the echo of Vivienne's voice chasing her. A governess writing such things to a duke. Her chest burned, memories crashed over her, the chapel years ago, the letter that wasn't hers, Tristan's silence then mirrored by his silence now. Rain had soaked her gown that day. Tonight it was her tears. She reached her chamber, slamming the door, falling against it as sobs tore free. Her trunk sat waiting, half-packed. She pressed her forehead to the lid, whispering through gasps. Fool, fool to believe. He will never choose you. A soft knock broke through her weeping. Miss Hale? Henry's small voice. Why are you crying? Did someone hurt you? She clamped her hand over her mouth, stifling her sobs. Go to bed, Henry. But please. Her voice cracked. Please, darling, sleep. Silence. Then the sound of small footsteps retreating. Celeste collapsed onto the bed, clutching the ribbon Henry had given her long ago. The house around her hummed with laughter, music, the clink of glasses, all mocking her as surely as Vivian's words had. She closed her eyes and whispered to the empty room, I will leave tonight. Before dawn, I will vanish. And this time, I will not return. Chapter 21. The Duke's Torment. Tristan Ashbourne stood at the head of the table long after Celeste fled. His hand gripped the back of his chair, knuckles white. He heard nothing of the noble's whispers, nothing of Vivienne's sweetly feigned innocence. All he saw was Celeste's face as she turned from him, shattered, betrayed, as though he had struck her himself. He had wanted to speak. God help him, he had nearly shouted the truth to silence Vivienne forever. But what would it have done? To name Celeste as his once betrothed, to drag her history into the open without proof. It would have destroyed her reputation completely, leaving her no shield, no way back. So he had held his tongue, and in doing so, he had wounded her more deeply than words ever could. When the dinner ended, he dismissed the nobles coldly, ignoring Vivienne's gloating smile. He stalked to his chamber, tearing open drawers, rifling through books, desperate for the forged letter he had discovered days earlier. He needed it in hand, needed to brand it before the court to prove her innocence. But when he found it, tucked safely within the poetry volume, the weight in his chest did not lift, because the damage had already been done. He paced before the fire, shadows clawing across the walls. His thoughts roared louder than the storm outside. Fool. Coward. You swore never to lose her again, and you let her walk away in tears. A knock came at his door. The steward bowed low. My lord, the governess's chamber. She is packing. She means to leave. Tristan's chest clenched. He strode past the steward, his boots striking stone like thunder. He did not care who heard. He would not let her vanish again. But when he reached her chamber, the door stood open, the trunk gone, the bed stripped bare. Only the candle still burned, a small pool of light over empty space. He pressed a hand to the doorframe, his throat tight. Celeste, he whispered into the silence. The house gave no answer. And for the second time in his life he realized he had lost her to the night. Chapter 22. The empty room. Ashbourne Hall was never silent, not truly. Even in the dead of night it breathed with the shuffle of servants, the creak of old timbers, the hum of distant wind. But when Tristan stood in Celeste's chamber, it was silence he felt most, thick, hollow, unforgiving. Her trunk was gone. Her dresses, plain though they were, no longer hung in the wardrobe. The ribbon she wore in her hair, the one Henry had once tied to her wrist in play, lay abandoned on the bed as though torn away in haste. Tristan bent, picking it up. The blue thread was frayed, soft from years of use. He turned it in his fingers, his throat aching. She had left. Again. Because he had failed her. Again. He pressed the ribbon to his lips, eyes closing. Memories rushed him. Her laughter years ago in the rose garden, her pale face beneath the chapel's veil, her trembling voice in the library just nights ago, and then her eyes at the dinner table, filled with betrayal when he did not defend her. Tristan's chest clenched until he could hardly breathe. He had told himself silence would protect her, that waiting would allow him to prove her innocence with evidence instead of words. But in doing so, he had broken her all over again. "No more," he whispered into the stillness. His voice cracked, but it carried the weight of vow. No more silence. He strode from the chamber, ribbon clenched tight in his fist, and barked orders to the steward. "Which road? Where would she go?" the man stammered. "To the inn at Wetherby, perhaps, my lord. It is the only coach stop within miles." Tristan didn't wait for more. Within minutes he was astride his horse, rain spitting against his face as he drove into the stormy night. Chapter 23. The Road to Wetherby. The storm had not relented. Sheets of rain lashed the countryside, turning the roads to rivers of mud. The horses' hooves pounded through puddles, each strike echoing Tristan's own heartbeat. His cloak whipped behind him, soaked through in moments, but he did not slow. Lightning split the sky, illuminating hedgerows, stone walls, the black ribbon of road stretching endlessly forward. Every mile carried memories. He saw her as she had been that day in the chapel, white gown soaked in rain, veil trailing like a shroud as she walked away. He had let her go then. He saw her as she had been just nights ago, eyes shining with tears in the library, whispering that she was no one. He had almost let her go then too. This time he swore he would not. The ribbon pressed into his palm like a brand. Hold on. Find her. Speak the words you should have spoken years ago. At last, through sheets of rain, the lights of Wetherby Inn glimmered on the horizon. Chapter 24. The inn. The common room of the Wetherby Inn smelled of smoke, damp wool and ale. Farmers huddled near the hearth, their boots steaming, voices low. A dog slept beneath a table, tail twitching with dreams. Tristan burst through the door, dripping rainwater onto the floorboards. The innkeeper looked up, startled, bowing low. "Your Grace." "Have you seen her?" Tristan demanded, voice raw. "A young woman, travelling alone." The innkeeper hesitated, his eyes flicked to the staircase. "Aye, sir. Arrived but an hour past. Asked for a room, paid in coin, though she looked, well, not the sort to travel alone." Tristan's chest loosened with relief. She was here, still within reach. He strode for the stairs, boots striking hard against the wood. Each step felt like climbing toward fate. At the top he found her door. A faint glow of candlelight slipped beneath the crack. His hand lifted, trembling. He knocked once, twice. "Celeste," he said, voice breaking. "Please." Silence. He closed his eyes, pressing his forehead to the wood. "I will not leave. Not this time. If you send me away, I will wait on this threshold until the dawn. But please, let me say what I should have said years ago." The latch clicked. Slowly, the door opened. Chapter 25. The confession. Celeste stood within the small chamber, candlelight painting her in gold and shadow. Her gown was plain, her hair damp from rain, but to him she was more beautiful than any duchess in silk. Her eyes, though, her eyes were wary, wounded, rimmed red from weeping. "Why are you here?" she whispered. He stepped inside, closing the door behind him. "Because I cannot lose you again." She laughed bitterly, though it was closer to a sob. You already have. Twice, once at the altar and again tonight before them all. Her words struck like whips, but he did not flinch. He sank to his knees before her, his cloak dripping onto the floor. "Celeste," he said hoarsely, "I was a coward. At the chapel, I believed lies because they were easier than fighting. Tonight, I held my tongue because I thought silence would shield you. I was wrong, both times. My silence has been the sharpest dagger against you, and I cannot bear it any longer." Her lips trembled, tears spilling. "Do you know what it cost me? To live invisible, to raise a child that is not mine because I could never have my own life, to watch you walk rooms I scrubbed as if I had never existed." His chest ached. He reached for her hand, clutching it tight though she resisted. "I know, and I would give my title, my lands, my very name to undo what was done. But I cannot change the past. I can only beg you to let me change the present." Her gaze searched his, fierce and desperate. "And if I say no? Then I will still kneel here until my knees break. Because whether you forgive me or not, you are my only truth. You always were." Her sob broke free. She sank against him, her fists striking his chest once, twice, before curling into the soaked fabric of his cloak. He gathered her close, his lips at her hair. "I never should have let you go," he whispered into the storm of her tears. "Never." And at last she let herself weep in his arms, not because she doubted him, but because she wanted to believe. Chapter 26. The Dawn Vow. They sat together until the storm outside faded to a soft drizzle, until the candle burned low, until exhaustion stilled her trembling. Tristan had not moved from his knees, though she leaned against him now, her head on his shoulder. His hand brushed her hair, reverent, as though afraid she might vanish if he let go. When dawn's first light crept through the window, pale and gentle, he finally spoke again. "Come home with me. Not as governess, not as shadow. Come as who you are, as Celeste Morland, as the woman who was always meant to be Duchess of Ashbourne." Her breath caught. "And Vivian?" His jaw hardened. "Vivian will answer for what she has done. I have the forged letter. I will bring it before the council, before the Queen herself if I must. I will see her power broken, her lies unmasked. No one will ever steal your name again." Celeste closed her eyes, a single tear sliding down her cheek. "And if the court refuses you?" He tilted her chin, forcing her to meet his gaze. "Then I will cast off court, title, crown, everything. I will build a life with you anywhere, even in exile. Because without you, I am already nothing." Her lips parted, trembling. For the first time in years, hope stirred in her chest, not fragile but fierce. She leaned forward, pressing her forehead to his. "Then I will go with you." His breath shuddered. He closed the small space between them, his lips finding hers in a kiss that was not gentle, but desperate, breaking, healing. It tasted of rain and salt, of years lost and found again. When they parted, the candle guttered out, and dawn bathed them both in light. For the first time since girlhood, Celeste felt not erased, but seen. And for the first time since manhood, Tristan felt not bound, but free. Chapter 27. Return to Ashbourne Hall. The road back to Ashbourne was softened by dawn, pale mist rising from fields washed clean by rain. Tristan rode with Celeste at his side, not in the saddle, but within his carriage, the ribbon she had nearly left behind curled safely in her palm. The ride was quiet, filled with a fragile peace neither dared to break. When the towers of Ashbourne Hall loomed from the fog, Celeste's stomach twisted. Those walls had been her prison and her sanctuary. She had walked them as governess shadow ghost. Now she returned as herself, though the world did not yet know it. Henry was waiting at the grand steps, hair dishevelled, eyes red from sleepless worry. When he saw her descend from the carriage, he ran forward, flinging his arms around her waist. "You came back. I thought you'd gone forever." Celeste knelt, clutching him tight. "I could never leave you, darling." Her voice cracked, the truth heavier than her reassurance. Tristan watched, chest aching at the sight. That boy had lost too much. Celeste had lost more. And he would see to it neither lost again. Behind Henry, Vivian appeared. Her gown shimmered like poured wine, her jewels catching the morning sun. She smiled sweetly, but her eyes glinted sharp as daggers. "Well," she drawled, "what a touching reunion." Celeste rose slowly, her hand still gripping Henry's. Fear quivered in her, but Tristan stepped forward, shielding her with his presence. "Vivienne," he said, voice low, dangerous. "We are finished with whispers. Today, the truth is told." Chapter 28. The Council Hearing. By afternoon, the great hall was filled. Nobles lined the chamber, their voices a hum of speculation. Servants pressed to the corners, wide-eyed at the promise of scandal. At the dais, Tristan stood tall, Celeste beside him. Her heart thundered, but she held her head high, refusing to bow to shame any longer. Vivian swept forward, feigning outrage. "What charade is this, brother by marriage, to bring a governess into court, to parade her beside you as though she—" "Silence!" Tristan thundered. His voice rang against stone, commanding silence instantly. He held aloft a folded parchment, yellowed, fragile, damning. "Years ago, I received a letter written in Celeste Morland's hand, or so I believed. It begged me to release her and marry her sister instead. On that lie, a marriage was forged, a future destroyed." His gaze cut to Vivian. "That letter has been found." Gasps rippled through the hall. He opened the paper, displaying it. "This is no handwriting of Celeste. It is yours, Vivienne. Your flourish, your stroke, your forgery." Vivienne's smile did not falter, but colour drained from her cheeks. "Accusations. You cannot prove—" "I can," Tristan said coldly. He gestured, and the steward stepped forward, bearing another parchment. A childhood letter of Vivienne's, its script unmistakably the same. The nobles leaned forward, whispers sharpening to outrage. Vivienne's mask cracked. She sneered, her voice sharp. "And what if I did? She was weak, childish. She never would have managed your house. Your name. I saved you, Tristan." Celeste flinched at the venom, but Tristan's hand brushed hers, steady, grounding. "No," he said, his voice cutting steel. "You stole, you lied, and in doing so, you condemned us both." Chapter 29. Justice and Reckoning. The Queen's emissary, seated at the head of the chamber, rose. His crimson robe swept the floor as he spoke, his words final. "Forgery of betrothal documents is treason against the noble house. Lady Vivienne, you have confessed enough with your own tongue. Your titles are forfeit. Your name shall be stricken from the peerage. You are banished from this court." The chamber erupted, some in shock, some in satisfaction. Vivian's eyes blazed. She turned to Celeste, spitting her last venom. "You think you've won? You will always be second. Always the forgotten shadow." Celeste met her gaze, steady now. "Not anymore." Guards stepped forward, escorting Vivian from the hall. Her laughter echoed sharp, bitter but fading. The air that remained was heavy, trembling with what had been broken, and what might finally be restored. Tristan turned to Celeste, his hand seeking hers. For a moment all the chamber fell silent again, waiting. Chapter 30. The Second Proposal. Tristan went to one knee, before the council, before the court, before every pair of eyes that had ever doubted. He bowed, not as duke, but as a man who had lost too much and would risk all to win her back. "Celeste Morland," he said, his voice thick, raw, carrying through the hall. "I failed you once, and again, and again. I let silence steal my tongue and lies steal our future. No more. I ask now, not as duty, but as desire. not as command but as plea. Will you, at last, be my Duchess? Celeste's breath caught. Tears blurred her vision, but this time they were not of shame. They were of reclamation. She saw him kneeling, the powerful Duke of Ashbourne lowering himself before her, his voice trembling, his hand outstretched, not demanding, asking, her lips curved, trembling. Yes. The chamber erupted in applause, cheers, whispers of astonishment. Tristan rose, pulling her into his arms, sealing the vow with a kiss that silenced all others. For the first time their union was not arranged, not stolen, not silenced. It was chosen. Chapter 31. The Duchess of Ashbourne. Ashbourne Hall glowed with candlelight that evening, not with scandal, but with celebration. Servants filled the halls with music, nobles raised glasses, and Henry darted between tables shouting, "She's the Duchess! She's the Duchess now!" Celeste stood at the grand staircase, her gown simple still, her hair loose about her shoulders. She did not need jewels to shine. The hall that had once mocked her now bowed before her. Tristan joined her, his hand warm at her back. He bent to whisper against her ear, voice low, reverent. "This time I will never look away." She turned, pressing her forehead to his. "And this time I will never let go." Later, alone in the library, she burned the forged letter in the hearth. The flames consumed it, ash scattering like the remnants of her erasure. She watched until nothing remained, until the smoke curled upward like release. Tristan took her hand, his thumb brushing the inside of her wrist where her pulse beat fast. "From this night forward," he murmured, "you are not the girl who vanished. You are my Duchess, my love, my forever." Celeste smiled, her heart at last whole. She had once been given to a duke, then stolen from him, then erased. But now she was chosen, and more importantly, she had chosen too. Chapter 32. Ashbourne Reborn. The bells of Ashbourne rang at dusk, their sound carrying across the valley like a benediction. Servants hurried about the hall not with whispers of scandal but with laughter, garlands in their arms, ribbons trailing like streams of joy. Celeste walked through the great corridors, each step surreal. Once she had crept these halls in silence, her eyes lowered, her name forgotten. Tonight, she moved with her chin lifted, her hand light upon Tristan's arm. The staff bowed deeply as she passed. Some smiled outright, relief shining in their eyes. A maid whispered, "Our Duchess," with tears of gladness. Celeste's heart swelled, though she struggled to believe it. For so long she had been shadow, governess, ghost. To stand here now, not hidden, not erased, but restored, it was like breathing after years beneath water. Tristan glanced down at her, his hand covering hers. "You see? They already know you were always meant to be here." She blinked back tears, pressing her lips together. "I feel as though I am walking in someone else's dream." "No," he said softly, eyes fierce. "It is ours. Hard won, but ours." Batu, Chapter 33. Henry's Place. Later that evening, Celeste found Henry sulking in the nursery, a toy soldier dangling from his fingers. "You missed the feast," she teased gently, kneeling beside him. "I thought you'd be dancing atop the tables." Henry sniffed, looking up with wide eyes. "Are you going to leave again now that you're Duchess?" Celeste's heart twisted. She gathered him close, smoothing his hair. "Never. You are my family too." Tristan leaned in the doorway, watching, his chest aching at the sight. He had feared the boy would lose again, but Celeste's words soothed more than Henry. They soothed him. Henry's small arms clutched Celeste tighter. "Good," he muttered fiercely, "because you belong here more than anyone." Celeste kissed his brow, and for the first time, she believed it. Chapter 34. Quiet in the library. When the hall had quieted, When servants drifted to their rest and Henry slept soundly, Celeste wandered to the library. The hearth still glowed with embers. The ghosts of her past lingered in every corner. The night she sang too loudly, the night she fled weeping. Now she came not as fugitive, but as mistress. On the mantel she placed a single keepsake, the ribbon Henry had given her long ago, once nearly lost in her trunk of exile. She smoothed it flat, her hand trembling not with sorrow but with reverence. Tristan entered quietly, his steps soft against the rug. He watched her for a moment, then spoke. "You once told me songs were poems too shy to be read aloud. Will you sing for me again, Celeste?" She turned, smiling faintly. "If I do, will you listen this time?" He crossed the room, gathering her into his arms. Every note, every breath, always. And as her voice rose softly, trembling through the quiet library, his eyes closed, his heart finally at rest. Chapter 35. The Duchess's morning dawn crept across Ashbourne, gilding the world in light. Celeste woke not in a governess's narrow cot, but in a chamber fit for a duchess, the canopy embroidered with roses. Tristan lay beside her, his arm heavy over her waist, his breath warm against her neck. For a moment, she simply breathed, letting the reality sink deep into her bones. She slipped from bed, wrapping a shawl around her shoulders, stepping onto the balcony. Below, the estate stretched endless, gardens, stables, fields, all glittering with dew. This was her world now, not because it had been given, but because she had claimed it, endured for it, chosen it. Tristan appeared behind her, his arms wrapping around her from behind. He pressed a kiss to her temple. "Do you regret it?" he murmured. She turned, meeting his gaze. "Not a moment." Chapter 36. More than chosen. That evening, Ashbourne held a ball, not for politics, not for show, but for joy. The great hall glowed with lanterns, music spun through the air, laughter echoed. And at the centre of it all, Tristan led Celeste to the dance floor. She wore no jewels save for a single sapphire ring, his mother's heirloom, now hers. Her gown was simple but radiant, her smile brighter than any candle. As they danced, the crowd faded. For them, there was no one else, only the memory of what they had lost and the promise of what they had found again. When the final note stilled, Tristan held her hand aloft. His voice rang through the hall. "She was once given to me by duty, then stolen from me by lies. But tonight I tell you this, Celeste Morland is mine not by decree, but by choice, and more importantly, I am hers, by heart, by vow, by eternity." The hall erupted in cheers. Celeste leaned close, whispering through tears. "Once I thought my worth depended on being chosen. But now I know. Love is not about being chosen. It is about choosing too." Tristan kissed her, soft and certain, sealing the truth. And so, beneath the vaulted ceilings of Ashbourne, Lady Celeste Morland became more than the girl given, more than the governess forgotten. She became the Duchess who chose, and was chosen in return, forever.